Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar today with Shiva.ai, VLBS versus mobile LBS, why phones alone aren't enough. Thanks everybody, my name is Trevor Kerwin. I am the energy analyst and VLBS influencer for here at Shiva.ai. Again, thank you very much for joining us here today. We're looking forward to a very lively and interesting discussion on this new market we're defining as vehicle location-based services, VLBS, and its interaction, or which we see as an outgrowth of the current mobile LBS market. The market as we define that now. So we're going to have an interesting set of presentations and discussions about where we see that market growing for the in-vehicle commerce market, the interaction with the current ecosystem for mobile commerce as we see it, and seeing where the growth patterns will be for that and where the opportunities will be in the future. With just a quick overview of how we'll be running this today, I'm just a few opening remarks, and then I'll be bringing up one of my colleagues, Reg Snodgrass, head of growth, to give us a bit of an overview of setting the table about what the VLBS market looks like. After a few minutes of that, I'll be bringing up Shiva's founder and CEO, Evgeny Klochkin, as well as Rob Tiffany, VP and head of IoT strategy at Ericsson, to talk a little bit about the interaction between the mobility commerce or the phone world and the connected car world, and how those two ecosystems, how one ecosystem came about, and how we see the next one growing. After that, Reg will rejoin us, and we'll dig down a little bit further into those discussions. Then finally, we'll be tackling your questions and any follow-up you might have from the audience. So without further ado, so the VLBS, we see it as the next growth for the e-commerce to mobile commerce market, to the new in-car, connected car commerce market. I like to call up Reg Snodgrass, our head of growth for Shiva, former chairman at Vlbs, and I think this is how I know Reg from our background together. But as well, Reg spent some time at Alcatel and Vlbs, and has a fantastic background in how these ecosystems get built out. So Reg, over to you.
Thanks, Trevor. And thank you guys for joining us. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Look, like all good startups in a new market, what Shiva set out to do early on was build this strategic market map, which kind of let us see where the business stack is and the technology stack is. And we're going to actually show you some more of that research so you guys can take that home. I think it's going to be interesting. But as we were doing that, we started to see some things that we couldn't unsee, right? And what we're calling them are the 4 core enablers. And Trevor, if you can go ahead and get into the slides, we'll get started talking about it. Mm-hmm. So if you can think of the web early days when it was void and formless, right? Before there was really any commerce on it, eBay appeared, right? And what eBay did through the user experience and other applications, website applications, is they took these 4 core pieces of understanding. Where is my user? Until you can know where your user is, you couldn't do shipping or logistics. Until you had identity and presence, you couldn't understand to be able to say that they're on network or off network in the middle of a shopping process. Until you could get ubiquitous notifications, you couldn't close the loop. And so as email began to form and all these pieces began to come together, you started to see killer apps appear. Go ahead, click through, Trevor. Next click. And so the early killer apps of like PayPal were built around location, identity, presence, and the ability for ubiquitous notifications to look. And you saw other really great applications to make this more easy, like Skyhook Wireless. And as that kind of emerged, we saw all these other killer, like Google, eBay, everything emerged around these 4 core enablers of location, identity, presence, and ubiquitous notification. And the trend would continue. Click ahead, Trev. into mobile commerce. And if you could think of early days, everyone likes to talk about how Foursquare changed the universe, but they forget how hard it was for us to build the location pieces in the network and the identity and presence that came from the mobile devices that allowed us to do things like notification directly and understand where it was. And after Foursquare came and they created the first ever use case to really understand how to pull these together for mobile, you then saw like Uber and Lyft and Waze and Yelp and WhatsApp really start to take over. And from those killer platforms, you saw the rise of things like Twilio and Location Labs, all built around making it easy and ubiquitous to get these pieces together. And so as we talk about and looked at, what's the next phase of vehicle commerce, as we're calling it, we're starting to see the same thing start to kind of center around the real-time access to these pieces of, go ahead and click through, Trevor, of, again, location, identity, presence, and ubiquitous notifications. And while we kind of bias about some of the early killer platforms, we'll show you how some of these real-time service platforms all work to get this identity and context together. So this is moving forward. Let's go to the next slide, Trevor. But you're seeing kind of the same problems in the same different decade, right? Everyone's arguing about, the business models. And I have a saying, it's like every time you say, oh, this person's going to pay, you got three fingers pointing back at you of P&Ls that are going to argue over whose money it really is within the organization. You've got like long-term infrastructure costs that have to be supported and provided for. And then you've got the development costs and, the tools that are going to be built. The good news is these cycles get faster. And, we've been here before, as we stated in the previous slide. And so we're seeing in our research that the market is actually applying these lessons of things like open APIs and open standards and new business frameworks really effectively. And so that's how we were able to work and come up with this next piece here. Trevor, if you could push it forward. And so this is it. Yay, ta-da. There was a lot of work put behind this with the team. And really what it is it's showing you the business flow and the data flow of all these different separate components of what we call make up for us VLBS, but for the entire community, the vehicle real-time service layer. And for everybody, this is how v-commerce works, right? And so you have the OEMs, right, where the TCU and HMIs sit, and you have these different groups that are fighting to be the dominant player on the chipset side and deliver connectivity, but also deliver GPS like Quectel or U-Blocks. And then up there you have the connectivity layer, where already all the telecoms are having their automotive solutions for connectivity selling into the OEMs. This stuff is real. It's today. In that, it connects to the OEM cloud, which you'll see all the familiar names up there at the top on the OEM cloud. And in that OEM cloud, you have several things like that connection to edge compute, which big players, again, already working on, already have their business models, already trying to sell to you. And so we have two different pieces here that we like to talk about on the left and right side, which is the data layer. It's kind of a latent service layer where a lot of the big analytics come from, where Autonomo is. On the flip side in the ecosystem, there are things like Shiva and Mojio and Car IQ, which is this real-time service layer. And when we talk about vehicle commerce, we really want to talk about what you can get and give in this real-time service layer. And it's things like identity is created and context is created in this layer from all these other pieces and components via APIs. The world has just evolved to move quickly. And through those APIs, that's how the enterprises and the mobile and IVI developers of the world actually get the gem of context in the real time, connecting to things like Shiva, Car IQ, Blue Dot. So what you'll see emerge more quickly is this open API service layer, right? Where applications can use that are existing today, like the Shell apps of the world, or the McDonald's of the world for things like curbside pickup, but what you're really going to be looking for is, what are those new applications that just, change the orientation of things. So anyway, this is the market map. We'll get into it further. We'll definitely repeat it quite a bit, but I want to move through here pretty quickly. So what can you do? right? Important things, right? One, decide on the stack. Just make a decision. Everybody's stack is similar. Everyone has their, pros and cons. These stacks will all start to align over time. Don't overthink it. Move forward. Next, know your core competencies. How did you participate in mobile? If you didn't, okay, so that's a problem. Did you participate in data? Okay, expand on the things that you do well. Next, define your success, right? You're always going to have to justify the cost for this. And so, what are you going to sell upstream? Is it new revenue? Is it new services? Can you even take this revenue? The next thing is definitely identify the roles. Everyone fights about this early revenue and where it comes from, who really owns this P&L. And the next thing is just know the timelines. Large companies have been crushed by not understanding these timelines. Is it a 3-month timeline, 3 years? You can always catch up, but not always, right? So, what does being left behind really cost you? Understanding that, learning how to follow the money. Are you good at licensing? Are you good at transactional? What's the long-term value focus of your business? Next, Trevor. And I just want to say thank you guys, right? This is a very important decision that you're going to be coming up with. I'm excited to watch this market grow, like we did with e-commerce and mobile commerce. We're going to see that today. Trevor, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rich, for the setting the table for us on that. I wanted to bring up now for the next step in this, sort of drilling down into the mobile transitioning to VLBS market. I want to bring up Rob Tiffany, VP and head of IoT strategy at Ericsson, as well as Evgeny Klochkin, founder and CEO of Shiva. And maybe we'll just kick this off. Rob, can you maybe give us a few seconds about your background and how you got to be here today, looking at this market?
Yeah, absolutely. I've probably done IoT for way too long. I was doing that stuff with vending machines in the 90s, and then was part of the growth of wireless data networks, and then the mobile revolution. I did a mobile device management startup in the early 2000s, and then I spent most of my career at Microsoft. If anybody remembers Windows Mobile or Windows Phone with the tiles, I know there's at least 2 or 3 of you out there that maybe had one. But yeah, a lot of time in the mobile space, and then IoT, built Azure IoT, and then built Lumada at Hitachi to do the industrial stuff. And so now I'm hanging out at Ericsson, and we make that 5G stuff that everybody's talking about.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Rob, for joining us. And Ev, maybe just briefly from you, a little bit about your background and how you got here with Shiva.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trevor. Indeed, we started this company 5+ years ago, and part of the story is that it's very personal to make sure that everyone has access to VLBS, vehicle location-based services, and something that will automate and bring more convenience into our space, into our lives as we drive around. Because vehicles have not changed too much if you think about it. Yes, we get bigger screens, and we get a lot of more functionality in terms of driving and safety, which is very, very important and critical. But when talking about convenience and payments and navigation, all of these things would really benefit from additional value. So just a quick background on why this company even exists is because I was driving my pregnant wife to hospital, late for a doctor's appointment. I had to walk all the way to the parking meter, take the receipt, put it back on the dash. She had to wait all that time. Like, why can't I just park and walk away? So that's when I called my brother, who's an R&D engineer, and I said, okay, can we do it with a smartphone? No, because of location is not accurate enough. And because he never leaves the phone in the car, how the heck do I track the full parking session? So that is how this company started. And now we're doing fueling, we're doing EV charging, we're doing tolling, we're doing curbside pickup, we're doing drive-throughs. So all of those applications that are around location, which Rob will attest to, this location is so important and has been so important in mobile world for so long. Then this is really what we're focusing on. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Trevor.
Very good. Well, thank you guys. And so let's dive into it right away here. And the first question here is going to be for Ev to start. It's probably the best one. It was like, you just kind of touched on that, Ev. the world, when they're going to hear about VLBS, is going to say, well, I already got a phone in my pocket. Isn't that enough? Adding an app to my car seems to be, seems like a barrier of some kind. Like, what's the thing to overcome there for adoption?
You see, Trevor, we interact with a lot of OEMs and tier one suppliers in the automotive space. And what we see and observe is that they have been in the business for a very long time, and they have tried app stores, they have tried marketplaces, multiple other things to put applications into the actual in-vehicle infotainment platform, so that essentially it's replicating some of what you do on the phone. What happened though is that consumers came back and they said, no. We already have a smartphone. We want CarPlay. We want Android Auto. We want just to connect my smartphone and see it as a mirror on the screen, nothing more. What was the reason for that? Is because when you have a new app, your main barrier is adoption, because you have to change your user routine. When you arrive at the fuel station, you have to remember, instead of going on an app on my phone or kind of going and swiping the credit card, which 90% of people do, then you would have to remember to go on the IVI app and remember where it is, and that kind of click. So it has been a big barrier for adoption of drivers. Therefore, what we do at Shiva and the paradigm and the concept that we have here is, why don't we have sort of an opt-out system where we push services onto people? Because when I arrive at the gas station, when I stop at the gas pump, it's pretty obvious what I need there. I need fuel. When I drive an electric vehicle and I stop at an EV charging spot, it's pretty obvious what I need there. I need to charge my vehicle. If I go and park and I turn off my engine and I walk away, it's pretty obvious I need to park there. So understanding the context of where the driver is what drives adoption and drives the seamlessness of what we're pushing. Because why don't you come in to Shell or BP or ExxonMobil, and then all of a sudden on your in-vehicle infotainment platform, it just pushes a notification saying, welcome to Shell, you're at gas pump number 3, activate, one tap. And then you just go and fill up the tank. So that is what, in our view, it's not another app to add to the vehicle. It's an appless experience that is more of a push notification piece that is more critical here to make sure that we have adoption and more of engagement is actually a better word here, to engage the customer and make sure that they use it every day.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Thank you. And then Rob, maybe then for you as a follow-up on that, I mean, given what I've just said there, I mean, is this, is this competitive to the phone market as you might understand it, or is it additive? Is there a co-opetition kind of situation between handset makers or telcos and the connected car universe as we know it?
Yeah, well, it'll probably be a little of both. Everyone wants to take over the world, no matter what space they're in, and so they're all going to try, right? But I think Ev said it best. It's like the difference between how humans interact with a phone versus kind of like IoT, things in the background, seamless things just happen and take care of you. And I think that's what's going to differentiate this. Like, for instance, in my car, when my car senses that I'm getting low on gas, it takes actions. It automatically goes, oh, I see you're only 40 miles to go. And it uses the navigation system in the car and GPS and goes, oh, there's a Shell station 2 miles away. Do you want to go there? And you literally click accept, and then it's going to navigate you to the Shell station. For in this case, it could have been any gas station. But I think the takeaway though is it's not something that was coming from the phone, and you shouldn't be looking at your phone to do actions like that anyway. I think people are going to expect this kind of capability. All this background seamless automation to make your life easier. I think it's going to be a whole lot more of that. Telcos, people like Ericsson, we're just going to create the connectivity, to make a lot of that stuff happen. As far as location, yeah, you can use GNSS or GPS. There's actually some new technologies coming out in the newer updates to the spec around 5G, actually, that will also let you get hyper accurate navigation systems from cell towers that you couldn't do before. So I think they'll help. There'll be helpers there, but I don't necessarily see. There are IoT players. There's folks who are doing IoT for things that move around. And I'm friends with a lot of those guys, whether they're at Microsoft or Amazon, a lot of other players. And so, they're exploring connected car type things and seamless stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those folks kind of dive into that space as well.
Right on. It's I was gonna say it's everything seems to be moving in every direction at once, and
Yeah.
a lot of the folks in the space. So, well, Ev, and sort of jumping off of what Rob had mentioned there, and what you said before as well, like location is kind of the location accuracy seems to be kind of the holy grail here, right? This is the thing that really is the core of Shiva. How are you getting closest to it? Like what's that, what's actually closing that physical gap between the user and what they want to do?
Yep, and you're absolutely Trevor. You're absolutely right, Trevor. And Rob, thank you so much for bringing it up. That 5G is coming. There are certain things that are happening around location, and we're really looking into this accuracy because accuracy gives you that important context. One thing is if you know just that you arrived at the gas station and that's it. You have no idea. Did you go to a convenience store, or did you go to the gas pump, or did you go to the car wash? Like if you have no idea, that creates the scenarios and multiples which do not allow you to present the seamless experience, which does not allow you to this push notification, kind of bringing it onto the customer. While if you have this accuracy to understand, okay, if you're in the premises of the gas station, you go to the gas pump, or you go to a car wash, or you go to the convenience store and park next to it, you already know what the customer is looking for. So this context is what is very important and why accuracy is important. Now, what has been happening in the world, and this is something that, since GPS, everyone has been probably looking into this issue, right? How do you increase the accuracy? Obviously, we do not have access to the military band of the GPS, which would provide you a little bit more accuracy there. But on the civilian GPS, the main problem that we've seen scientifically is whenever you talk about 5G cellular towers, or you're talking about a GPS or GNSS in general, so multiple constellations, the issue is it's outside of the object. So there is a receiver there that has to receive the signal coming from somewhere else. And the problem with the signal is it gets reflected, it gets kind of contaminated, it gets all around, which is what happens when you go to the urban canyon. And the reason why you cannot locate yourself in Manhattan very easily is because the GPS signal is just reflected off the buildings. Even that precision is going to be okay, meaning that you still kind of see that blue dot, but it can be 50 meters away. And we should not really mix together the accuracy and precision here, because precision, yes, it may be there, it may be up to 1 meter, but the accuracy will be way off. And that is something we observe. Therefore, many companies like Google, Uber, and so on, they have been trying, especially on mobile world, they have been trying to leverage connectivity, right? To see, okay, Google invested a ton of money into Wi-Fi networks, obviously, right? They actually delivered those to Starbucks for free just to have access to those points and to understand how we can triangulate, how we can increase the accuracy of the location, because the signals are reflected and because, it will be just a little bit closer. But that connectivity still does not give us the accuracy that we need, because there's still that many points you can put together with the cellular towers, even with the bigger band, with the bigger density, as Rob was mentioning about 5G. So what we have been looking into is philosophically that it's more important to focus on the object itself, in this case the vehicle, and really utilizing more of this inertial data that is coming from the vehicle, from the wheels, essentially, right? And understanding mathematically how the vehicle moves. All of us probably remember the movie The Beautiful Mind, where he was kind of drawing kind of the pigeons, how they move around on the glass on the window. And yeah, that's exactly what you have, because now you understand the vehicle cannot jump right for 20 meters, right, in 1 second. It's just impossible. So utilize some of that knowledge in the data science and the AI sense. And then you also utilize the inertial data coming from the vehicle itself. It does accumulate error a lot. Obviously, that is why we cannot rely only on inertial navigation systems unless we're kind of, military missiles or something like that.
Unless you're on a submarine.
Exactly. Submarine, yes. But obviously, like we still need GNSS. We still need it to correct those errors. But it's really utilizing this object embedded systems is what the philosophy of Shiva is. like the submarine, as Rob just mentioned, and really kind of focusing and figuring out how to mathematically make sure that we can get under 2-meter accuracy, which is what we do here.
And I think so. So the audience knows, Rob, you were a former submariner in a million lifetimes ago, right?
Yeah, and we had a submarine inertial navigation system because it's hard to get GPS with a satellite when you're deep under the ocean. And so,
exactly. Yes.
yeah, it's kind of a thing.
kind of critical. Thank you very much, Ev, for that. And Rob, then back to you, maybe just to elaborate a little bit more on what you'd said previous to in the previous answer too, Rob. Maybe we've set kind of a VLBS glide path here for development. And you've talked about, we talked about who's kind of playing in it. Who do you think, in your mind, who's the most incentivized? OEMs, automotive, telco, app developers. Like, who in your mind really is kind of everybody's incentivized, but who do you think is the most incentivized? I guess.
Yeah, when you see a new space like this, if we go back in time, any of us who've done multiple rodeos in this tech world, whenever there's something new, you see a zillion players show up to the party, and you see a lot of fragmentation, and a lot of people are going after, that big sack of money that they think is waiting for them. And then you see consolidation, and you see that this cycle happens all the time. And you'll see a lot of people who will make statements go, we're the only company uniquely positioned to do blah, 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 right? When they go after a particular market. And so don't be surprised that the OEMs, the automotive manufacturers themselves will say, we're going to build this. We're going to put it into our cars. And then no doubt about it, we've got all these tech companies that have been doing things like that. IoT companies are going to do it. It's funny is, if I compare it, like we keep talking about gas stations, or if I talk about cellular, there's something in common there that has to happen to make all this stuff work. And it's called a commonality and common standards. For instance, if Shell made a certain type of gasoline and Texaco made a different type of gasoline, and they were saying ours is the best, you should only use ours, and you had to buy a certain kind of car to use Texaco gasoline, it would fragment the whole space, and the whole automotive world wouldn't take off the way we thought it would. It's the same way with cellular. Even though Ericsson and Nokia and Huawei and Qualcomm, they're all coming up with patents and driving what's possible in wireless communications, at the end of the day, though, they all have to sit down together around the table and collaborate and say, well, but we're all going to make this, because when I'm flying from the US into Beijing, my phone needs to keep working the exact same way. And so this kind of stuff's going to happen in this space as well. And so you'll see a lot of proprietary ways of doing stuff early on. And then a lot of people are going to have to get together and hammer out the way we do it. And yes, like usual, I'm always putting my money on developers in a garage somewhere.
Fair enough. That's always been a safe bet. Well, thank you very much, guys. And what we're gonna do here, we're gonna invite Reg back up here to join us as well. Reg, there he is. Hey guys. So we'd like to take the next step in this, and this has been it's been a great discussion so far. Again, just a quick reminder to everybody out there in the audience, you can ask a question anytime in the Q&A, and we'll keep an eye on them and jump on them here as we get towards the end. But diving down a little bit more into this as well, and Reg, you've been listening to what the guys have been going on here about, from your perspective, given your background in this too, Reg, before joining Shiva, I mean, when do we cross the line of ubiquity here? Like, when will this be everywhere? I mean, it took
easy question.
Yeah.
Easy
Okay.
question.
It took several years.
Yeah.
All right.
What the timelines were.
Yeah,
So,
it's easy because everyone knows I'm going to be wrong and kind of right. It's easy to be kind of right in this. Look, Foursquare. I'm there with Rob, right, on the developers. Like Foursquare came along and dominated location. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about it. What are the new location apps? It created this wave, but in reality, man, that app didn't even make money, right? It solidified all the work of similar people, like people on this call, for telecom and handsets, and hundreds of thousands of coding hours, so that the 4 core enablers were available easy, so that they could build a business model where they didn't have to worry about making money, right? So that accessibility and that cheap accessibility to grow that business and test those new things, that kind of perpetuated that. And so when do we have that like Foursquare moment? And I think a lot of it kind of looks like this, right? The business model architecture, like that we showed you guys, that's all real. All those products, some of that's slideware, but there are real people in each of those groups that have real technology amidst slideware. You just have to do your research. It's just like every market, right? Rob's laughing because slideware is how it starts, right?
Always starts with slideware. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are real stacks. Those stacks are working. That stuff is in production, right? Every one of those components, there are production pieces there. So the market is ready. So like these markets come like an earthquake or a tsunami or a tornado. I grew up in Oklahoma, so tornadoes are there. It's like everybody feels them coming. They know they're going to be here. They're almost here. As long as the stack is here, there'll be a watershed. It always hits you, and no one is prepared. Everybody like freaks out no matter how much they've worked on it, and then all of a sudden it's a big P&L. So guess what? The guys with the little P&Ls that never worked on it, they lose their, it's just, that's pandemonium. That's how it goes. And so look, Toyota has 14 million vehicles. It's an OTA update. They have a real-time service layer with one OTA update, 90 days, they could be active, right? So anytime that somebody says, thumbs up, and, any of these larger groups decide to switch on any of these platforms, the accessibility goes from, hey, this is interesting, to we all got to have it. You get 14 million customers in Toyota driving the roads. Every service provider will just add in the API endpoint as long as the models make sense. And so I agree. And how it would roll out is, like one big OEM will get it, and then another OEM will say, oh shit, and they'll create their own standards, and they'll both get all these partners behind, lined up around these two different standards. And then, like Rob said, they'll all come together and agree on the standard, and then it's ubiquity in every car. So it's a 14 months time frame for someone to like, for something like this to be in heavy production, maybe 2 to 5 years to next week. We don't know. Like a lot of these NDAs are out, and I won't reveal things that Shiva are doing, but there are things happening where this could be imminent. And so in terms of preparation and readiness, to kind of finish the question, you should be ready now. But and just watch somebody like Foursquare come and take all the credit for everybody's hard work.
Thanks, Reg. And Rob, I since you've since we're both kind of wrinkly old men in the world of IoT, I guess, in a way, a
Only
lot
25.
So
What are you talking about?
You've aged better than me. I've seen this a lot with like edge deployments of cloud, where everybody's saying like, we're going to build the infrastructure, and this is what the world of infrastructure is going to look like. If we only have the use cases, and we know the use cases exist, but nobody's going to build the use case until the infrastructure is available, and so it's kind of like a dying trade. Yeah, and in that sense, if you take a look at this in the VLBS context, think about that, and what are the barriers to getting everybody in the ecosystem on board? Like, what's the is it a number of use cases? Is it penetration of a certain type of use case? What's the tipping point where we get to see some of this?
Sometimes you have to scare people into something. Sometimes the first use case needs to be around safety or around something that's really urgent, where the people go, oh gosh, I really need to have this. What's going to help this, like any kind of new trend or technology, that comes along, a lot of times it looks to the past to see something that people are already familiar with or comfortable with. And so, you can imagine referencing something, and you may laugh at this, but Chevy, and GM put OnStar in cars years ago, as just push the button no matter where you are to call for help. And when you relate it to something like that, people go, oh, this isn't something bleeding edge and new that may fail or whatever. We've been doing this for a long time. This is actually just an evolution of something we're already working on. And I always think that's helpful. I used to be a startup junkie, and you're at your startup and you go, it's ready now, and everyone's going to do it now. And then, 5 or 10 years later, they actually do it. Right. And so what's helpful to move people along is those stories and things that they can relate to that are already there in the world, or all those people driving Teslas that don't think that their Tesla is competing with their phone and their apps. All they know is because of over-the-air updates, aka device management for cars, IoT, and I know lots of people are using different technologies to do that. Their car gets better, which is kind of, me being in the IoT space, that's part of the deal. You're getting telemetry about how something's used, its health, its performance, and you send updates to make it better over time. And so, for the first time ever, people go, wow, I've got a car that's gaining in value instead of rapidly depreciating as soon as I drive it off the lot. The Tesla I bought 2 weeks ago is now better today than it was. I think of this technology is just additive to that whole trend. And so people it'll just be an update one day to their car saying, guess what? We're going to know when you pull up to the gas station and we already got your credit card, or we ever got whatever, and it's going to be automagic. And people are going to love that. And so that'll happen. And then the Reg's, tornado sirens in Oklahoma City and Tulsa are going to start going off. And there's like, oh, it's here. This is it. So I think it'll be something like that. And so it's important the storytelling is going to be critical to make it relatable, to make people feel comfortable, so they don't feel like it's some bleeding edge technology that might break or not. You know how it is. People get afraid with new things because things are always kind of rough early in the early days of new technology trends. So I think that's how it'll play out.
And Rob, and maybe Ev, you could jump in there, because Rob, you mentioned something, at the very top of that answer, which is to say, sometimes it's a shock that creates the opportunity. And I know that a part of what Shiva did as well, that's when I first started chatting with you guys, was around COVID restrictions, and how that's done so much to change the retail interactions that we have, and wanting to go out into the world and so on. Is there anything you can elaborate on that in terms of like what the opportunity became out of that? Just that what you see are those shock-driven opportunities in this space sometimes.
Right, absolutely. When all of this started, it was kind of pretty obvious that it's going to take some time before this pandemic is over. That was pretty clear, pretty fast, that it's not just going to go away tomorrow. That kind of really does have certain effects on the human behavior. One thing which I think was pretty obvious when all of this started is that, unfortunately, people are going to rely less on public transit, rely more on private cars, because of just kind of the safety of being inside my car, not being contaminated, all of this. So that was pretty obvious that, okay, car market is going to do just all right. If not for the chip shortage today, we would have a lot more sales for sure. So there are other things that happened kind of as a shock to the market. But generally, it's pretty obvious that the cars are not to go, right? Car ownership is not dead, which like many people were predicting, especially with shared economy, that, oh, we're going to share everything.
Right.
Well,
right.
Kind of, it didn't make sense back then in terms of kind of the business model. It kind of didn't work, the car sharing business model. But also it just kind of, the pandemic just kind of aggravated that and said, no, you know what? We still love the private cars. Another metric I actually like about this is because over 50% of Americans only have privacy in their private cars. They don't have privacy inside their homes. They have it in the cars. Because of course you live like with relatives, everyone, kids, whatever, right? But then when you're in the car, that's the only moment where you have privacy, right? And 50% of Americans say that. So that is an important metric that just tells me, yeah, that's not going to go anywhere. The car ownership is still going to be there, and the car sales are going to continue, if not to grow, then at least kind of plateau, right? They will still be there.
Right.
It's one thing. Then the other thing that COVID kind of gave is really these ideas about, okay, curbside pickup. It's called click and collect, CNC, in the retail industry, or kind of drive-throughs. Let's do more express lanes, because 70+% of revenue for restaurants, for fast food restaurants in particular, come from drive-through now. It was about 60% or 50% before, but now it's even more, because everyone is using drive-through. No one wants to go inside the restaurant, even if they're open, right? Exactly. Yeah. So the question is, for how long will these behaviors kind of stick around if people go back to what they used to do? But definitely that helps with vehicle location-based services, because now there's more and more happening from within the vehicle. Okay, and now we understand that there is more and more stuff that is connected to the car itself, and how consumers view the vehicle as kind of a home on wheels sort of thing, where you do receive certain services, you do receive certain products that you are expecting to receive. And the more convenience, the more promotion we give to this, the easier it is for everyone to just accept this new reality. And that is what I would suggest, Trevor, has been a major effect of COVID on this type of business.
Yeah, that's a very good point about the car being, I mean, especially in this world where people have suddenly found themselves in multi-generational homes 24/7, where you're working and living in the same space. And add maybe a little bit more to that too. Given what Rob has mentioned about the more about the technology stack, from your perspective, like who in the business stack is this? Who in the business stack will be the fastest mover? I mean, is it going to be more of a content-driven sort of app driven growth, or is it going to be somebody who's got control of some pipes that's going to drive that growth?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is looking in at Google, at Amazon, at Apple, what these guys are doing, because there is the kind of cutting edge technology and so on. In my view, what wins, and I will just echo some of the things that Raj was saying, the business model wins. Okay, if we do not understand the user journey, if we do not understand what consumers are looking for, it's like whatever technology you put out there. Smartphones like iPhone were around. I think the first company was 1995 or something. So they were trying to build it up, and then it didn't fly, it didn't go. What was the reason? Is because a business and the success of a story, of a technology story, is an ecosystem. It's not just one piece which you invent something and you write a PhD thesis about it and then off you go. Well, no, it's actually a lot more work, which is why not so many startups succeed, right? Because yes, it takes a lot of these pieces together to bring them and make sure that they work. Now, there is one thing which in automotive industry, and I wrote about this some time ago, which is called, I called it consumer conundrum of the automotive industry, where there is no direct relationship really from the OEM to the consumer, because all of this is happening through the dealerships. Because the dealerships have this kind of last leg of the journey to talk to the driver, to the buyer, right? And then they will do the same repairs and the same maintenance, the same warranty stuff, right? It's the dealership that has this connection to the community and to the consumer. So creating this connection, I think, or at least explaining how it works, right, is very important to help the automotive industry, to walk the automotive industry through this, to understand how to interact with the driver, what your driver would expect. And it's definitely not only technology piece, right? It's also understanding these user journeys and understanding kind of, again, echoing some of what Rob just said, understanding what consumers are used to. What is the evolutionary paths? Because revolutions just don't work all of a sudden, right? But they do work as an evolution where you just bring certain pieces together and you're like, oh, it's an Uber for fueling or whatever, or like a Airbnb for whatever, right? So these types of associations do help a lot. They help the investors early on. They help the strategic partners, and most definitely they do help the consumers to explain to them and to educate them what is that new out there that will work for them.
Fantastic. And you know, I wanted to take a quick check in here. We do have some questions coming in as well. I'm going to throw one more question to Reg, if you want to take this, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience. How do you see, Reg, from your perspective, how do you see the real-time service layer in the automotive, as Ev just sort of set the table for, in that, how do you see that real-time service layer evolving in the automotive sector?
You know, I think we'll see a lot of big players start to take it up. I mean, that's, yeah, as a Rob, as a veteran on the losing side of the platform wars of OEMs, you know, telecom OEMs, right? The handset providers ate up the majority of the revenue, right? It's and the reason is the accessibility and the nearness of the customer, right? They could block us out, and the telecoms, we just didn't move fast enough to get those great telecom assets out, open, and find out the right business models, right? It's a huge struggle for us, you know. And so as I think about the evolution of it, and kind of how the real-time service layer plays out, this is kind of a known ball game now. It's like, you know, everybody kind of, they've seen Twilio, they've seen Stripe, this has evolved multiple times. I do think that the automotive OEMs understand more that they are a platform and not a product company, right? I think the telecom folks got starry-eyed and we're all like, we can build like products, and they couldn't. Like, that's not in their core, their platform, right? And so they lost because they didn't focus on being a platform, you know. And so you know, you look at it, you know, with the example of Tesla as kind of a counterintuitive. They are a platform, but they build their own products on their platform, right? Very insulated. They're like the Apple of this marketplace. They'll be a standard because it's very tight. They have a very tight grip.
They got their walled garden.
Exactly right. So the real-time service layer is already there for Tesla. You can drive up to your EV charging. You know, it's just doesn't have location. It has some gaps, but they're constantly working on it. There's a catch-up thing. So I think everyone will either choose a Symbian, really fragmented route, or everyone or there will be a subset that will build their own personal walled garden or attempt to do it. And then there'll be another subset that'll be like open standards, we give up, you know. And so there'll be those three camps that will kind of move around. If the OEMs and their tier 1, tier 2 service providers really start to kind of understand we are a platform, and I think they're well on their way, and they focus on those early business models, making them fair, equitable, easy to use, I do see them having the chance to have their own system outside of Google Gas, outside of, you know, Apple. Yeah. So, and that's, yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think it will happen quickly. And I think you'll see in the next like 2 years how the sides line up, right? There'll be associations that will be more quickly. If you know, Laura Merling, my old boss, is at Google doing, you know, Google automotive stuff. So it's their same philosophy, similar philosophies are flying about. So let's see what happens in the next 6 to 9 months and who drops the early production. If one of the larger OEMs is able to get a service layer partner out with the large like mobile development community in a business model that isn't terrible, they can win, right? If they stick with traditional, you know, pay up front, heavy licensing, heavy, you know, transactional model revenue type stuff, it'll be the same exact thing that happened with the telecoms. There'll be a lot of money spent. There might be some money made, but then Google and Apple will dominate because they have app stores. They can control that revenue piece right now, but they can't control the data from the car yet until somebody makes a bad business deal around licensing.
Right. Good point. Well, thanks for that, and thanks for this part. Thanks for guys helping us dig down on this. We do have some questions coming in, so I'm gonna hang on here. I have one. Let's see here. Where do you see mass adoption of VLBS starting in the US? What regions do you think are more likely to be first movers? So it sounds like Ev, I'll throw that to you first, and then maybe Rob. But like, is there a I mean, other than Silicon Valley, is there something that is there something else that?
You know what's funny about Silicon Valley, since you brought it up, is that yes, technology is born there, but it's not necessarily used there
Right.
to start with, because you still look at the city of San Francisco and you still see a lot of kind of traditional city problems there, and something that the authorities are trying to tackle. So in my view, or rather in the market view, in our interactions with the market players out there, I see actually one of the more advanced places is Northwest, so Washington State and Oregon State. It's because the reason why I'm saying so, and not only because Rob is based there and he lives in Washington State.
Thanks for that.
But also because there is some progressive level of government involvement there. So when we talk road usage charging, for example, Oregon DOT and Washington DOT, both of those are super advanced in smart transportation. They understand what there is the challenges of kind of traffic management and congestion charging and all of this. You also have great schools like University of Washington in Seattle who do understand and who have their own kind of pieces of this market and understanding what is the role of telematics for last mile delivery. There is an urban freight lab there based in the University of Washington. So that's, in my views, these are kind of the two regionally, those are the two states. Again, talking not about where technology is born, because then you also think about Michigan. Obviously, that's where technology is going to be born because that's where the automotive industry is based, right? But from the adoption perspective, from the readiness of the community and from the readiness of the government and all the players, probably that's where it's going to happen first. And Chicago. I think Chicago is a really great place because the mayor is looking for making sure that the smart city and all the kind of vast and cutting edge tech is out there. We are also focusing a lot on Chicago. We are putting a lot of effort, a lot of investment into Chicago as a place where kind of you really have a lot of these players based out there, Allstate, Walgreens, kind of garages there, Millennium Parking Garage. CT Tech is a great organization there. It's a nonprofit that is pushing a lot of this effort to make sure that Chicago is really one of the most technologically advanced and best cities in the United States, but not only in the US, in the world, right? So these are kind of the two places where I see most of the traction. And then maybe to add, probably taxes is going to be interesting also from that side of the country. But other than that, it's really driven by just kind of gut feelings and impressions from our conversations with the government and so on.
And Rob, I know that your previous life at Hitachi to before Ericsson, we've done a lot of talk about smart cities. That's interesting. Is that what it takes? Is it, if you want to talk about where this gets rolled out, is it really down to one or two guys in a city or a state somewhere that really has the right take on innovation for it, or
never leave anything up to I don't leave anything up to the government to do anything right, ever. You know what? They screw up everything. You know what? Having extra capacity in the networks you might use will be helpful. With 5G, you can have 1 million concurrently connected devices to every cell tower. That's going to help. But these are just enabling things. You got to get just out on the street with regular folks, man. Look at what people are doing. It's just like everyone's kind of talked about, especially during COVID. Just all you have to do is just drive around and see what are people's behaviors like today. They're back in their cars. They're not sharing anything. And gosh, looking at the restaurants, who did well during COVID and who did not. If you had a drive-through, you had cars lined up around the block. If you didn't have a drive-through, you were going out of business. I started using, and so you have a lot of progressive, just look at private enterprise. Look at the restaurants who started building apps to let people order in advance and say, yeah, in 30 minutes, I'm going to be at XYZ restaurant. And you've seen all these restaurants put special parking spots, park here, turn on your flashers on your app, on your phone, say, I'm here now, and they're going to bring your food out to you. That's the common sense looking around, on what's happening in the market. And that's what's going to bring this together. And so it's relationships. it'll be one-on-one relationships, because so much of this is not going to just be technology. It's going to be contracts, and it's going to be deals that you have to strike with independent businesses is what's going to make this real. The gas stations are laggards because, and hopefully they're looking out, from behind the pump at what some of these progressive restaurants are doing to get people in there. And they're like, I wonder if we could do this themselves. But instead of everybody and their dog having their own independent app, like what we're seeing on TV right now, we went from, I'm cutting the cable and I'm going to use Netflix. And then all of a sudden 20 other apps come along. And now I have this fragmented market to watch all these shows, and people are going, wow. And so maybe the pendulum is going to swing back. I think the same thing is going to happen with you guys, because you're going to have a zillion restaurants and other things with a zillion apps. And they're going to say, this is ridiculous. Just bake it into my car so that when I show up, it just works and it's seamless. I think that's how it's going to play out.
Right. Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys. And we're at the top of the hour here, folks. In fact, we're a minute over. Thank you very much. We might have some other follow-up. Some folks have asked us questions. Maybe we could follow up with them later. Again, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rob, Ev, Reg, for joining us here today and having this discussion. Thank you out there for joining us. We've got, again, this will be available in a couple of days if somebody wants to pass it on to a colleague or review anything. And we're going to keep doing this kind of content for you to explain the market, not just Shiva, but to explain the market as a whole. And hopefully we can enlighten you going forward. So thanks again. And we'll be talking to everybody soon.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.